Hello everybody, it's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. Thought I'd do another video today in a series about how to run Savage Kingdoms, particularly Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition, which is the current edition of the game. Let's just get right to it. This is the third one in the little series that I started. Hopefully you guys saw the last couple ones and whatnot. So today's video is about health and stamina, how to adjudicate and how to use health and stamina in Savage Kingdoms role-playing games. So it's pretty easy, and it's obviously in the book, but it obviously helps to have someone kind of go through it in case you need help, particularly the designer. So on page 17 in the core rulebook, here we go, right there. Here's the core rulebook, of course, of Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition. In the character creation chapter 5, so on page 17 it talks about health. It talks about derived traits. So health and stamina are what's considered derived traits of Savage Kingdoms. You've got your attributes, right, which are your 6 kind of primary attributes, or I guess in D&D ability scores kind of things. And then you have your derived traits, which are traits or statistics that are derived from those 6 attributes. That's why they're called derived traits. So health, stamina, mobility, initiative, renown, there's one more in there, luck, are all derived traits because they are derived from those main statistics. So let's get right into health and stamina, which is what this video is supposed to be about, right? All right, health is figured, first of all, health. What is health? Health is a measure of, in fact, it really says right here. The health trait is a measure of how much physical damage or other forms of trauma a character or creature can take before being severely injured or slain. Your health at character creation is figured by 10. It's 10, so start with 10, plus 2 times your physique, plus your total endurance modifier, and endurance skill modifier. In other words, that's your vigor, and then any skill rank, so your total and endurance. So it's taking into account your vigor, of course, too, because tougher people that are in better shape, obviously can take a little more damage. It's just how it is. So for example, if you were to start with just a normal average physique of +0, you would start with 10 plus your total endurance. So say if you started with, say if you had a vigor of +1 and you put 2 skill ranks in endurance, that's 3, so you would start with 13 health. Half of that is 6. I'll get to what the health, what half means in just a second. Say if you had a physique of +2, you would start with 14 health points plus whatever your endurance modifier. We'll say in this case maybe you only have a +0 amount of vigor and you have 1 skill rank in it for a total of +1. So that would be 15 total health that you start with, which is above average, fairly well above average. Half of that would be 7 because it rounds down. So why is there half health and half stamina positions on the character sheet in Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition? Because it does trigger, there's actual game effects. So if you get to half health, which let's say you have 15 health and half of that rounded down to 7. If you get to 7 health, God forbid that you do, but it's most likely going to happen at some point in your Savage Kingdoms adventuring career. When you get to half, you suffer the effects of being reduced to where you now have -2 to all your die rolls. This is all die rolls, not just combat-related die rolls. The reason being, say if you're doing a lore roll, even if it's in the middle of battle, which happens, you can do it as an action, a lore type roll or some other kind of mental, non-physical thing. It doesn't matter. You're still wounded. You're having trouble trying to the fog of combat, all that stuff. So that's actually pretty realistic as well as just easy to adjudicate across the board. So that's all die rolls, and it's literally that language of die rolls because it could say if you were having to make a luck roll, it's still -2. Sounds kind of weird because this is luck, right? But luck is not only divine potential providence, but it also is figured part of your intellect, and magnetism figures into the original formula for luck, implying that some of that luck is on you, is on the character. Lucky people in general tend to be clever, smart people that kind of weasel out of stuff at the last minute. That's why there's an intellect thing. Magnetism reflects maybe you have a little more favor with the gods because you're more magnetic and charismatic and potentially a leader or whatever. So anyway, not too much about that. That's actually about the luck mechanic, but just to make a point why the -2 to die rolls would affect such things as luck. And so that's any die roll. It is also -2 to your defense when you're in that situation, being at half health or lower. What else does it do? And it's -2 to your mobility. Obviously, wounded people move slower. And so when you get to half health, you're pretty fairly seriously wounded. I wouldn't say critically. In fact, I don't even know if I actually named that condition per se. And you're probably not even necessarily grievously wounded, but you would say I would consider that would be heavily wounded, at least moderately wounded. Not to get too much into the horrible things that we may or may not in real life have suffered physically, traumatically. But if you've ever been in a situation where you were hurt pretty hard, you can probably see why these penalties apply. Even though it is a game, it is grounded in some sort of reality. Otherwise, the game doesn't work. That's a whole game design philosophy and probably a whole different video that I would like to do some of these days. All right, so -2 to defense, mobility, and all your die rolls. If you reach 0 health, and that's on the bottom of page 17, reaching 0 health, as you can imagine, generally means you go unconscious and you're considered helpless. You have the helpless condition. But you can avoid drifting into unconscious by succeeding in a DL 15 endurance roll. DL, again, means difficulty level. Difficulty level 15 is moderate difficulty, so if you go to 0 health exactly, you need to roll a 15 or better on an endurance skill roll to stay conscious. So if you fail, you fall unconscious, you become unconscious and helpless, and every round afterwards, unless someone gets to you in medical attention, you have to make another endurance roll, and the DL increases 1 for every negative that you're into health. So in other words, every round that passes. So say the next round okay, we'll say you go to 0. Next round comes around, no one's attended to you, your character's bleeding to death. The only thing you get to do in that turn is make an endurance roll. At this point, it's now at DL 16. If you fail that roll, you're now at -1 health points. If you succeed, you do not bleed out a point that round. However, you're still technically bleeding, you're just not bleeding as fast. So if the next round comes around, you're still not being helped or finished off or whatever happens, it would be DL 17. If you succeed in that, you don't bleed out a point that round, you're still unconscious. So if you critically fail an endurance roll in this case, so again, a critical failure is if you roll a natural 1, and the total modifier is 10 short of the DL, which is pretty likely in this case. If you're pretty wounded especially, you bleed out 2 points that round. So critical failure, bleed out 2. The other way you critically fail in Savage Kingdoms if you roll if you have a modified result of 0. So again, so say you roll a 3 and you have -4 and something, and there's a -1, so that's a critical failure. But anyway, you guys know how those critical failures work. So if you do critically fail this endurance roll while you're bleeding, you bleed out 2 health points that round. In addition to that, you also acquire the disfigured, lame, or maimed weakness. And this is GM discretion based on the type of injury. So for example, disfigured might be if you went unconscious mostly due to like acid or acidic type damage, or maybe burn damage as well. Or if specifically you got slashed across the face or something like that, because you would obviously be disfigured. So even if you survive this terrible situation, you probably have those wounds to carry the rest of your life. And that is a weakness in and of itself. It gives you -1 to performance and persuasion skill rolls is what this figure does. The other one is lame. Lame implies leg injuries. If you've looked at the weaknesses when you've done character creation, you already know what I'm talking about. Like an old leg injury, or maybe you're even born with a club foot or something like that, and it just reduces your mobility by 2, I believe. The other one is maimed. Maimed implies, at least for this game system, it's more of your upper body, particularly your hands, so you're missing several fingers, or you just have this terrible injury that you never could never really get full use of your arm or hand back. So again, depends on the injury. The GM can kind of choose, and maybe even the player is like, you know what, yeah, I got hit pretty hard in the hand in this particular. It's probably maimed, I'm thinking. So yeah. So those are your three options if that horrible event occurs. However, you're still not dead. So, I mean, maybe you are. The reason I say maybe is you die at half negative health. So, and all this stated pretty clearly in the book, but like with all games, there's often could be little points of confusion. So that's another reason on your character sheet you have health, the full health, the half health, because the half health means two things. So when you get to half your health, as we just said, in this case, 7 health, I think that was our example. Um, and also it serves that if you get to negative that second number, that is your death number. In this case, for the example that we're using, it would be -7 if you got to -7 health. So in Savage Kingdom 3rd Edition, you do track negative health in this situation, whereas in, say, D&D 5th Edition, you do not track negatives. Technically, you're at 0 unless you took enough damage to get to. Anyway, that's D&D 5th Edition. You know how that works. So there you go. That's on page 17. That's under health, and then there's a little sub article that says reaching half health, which I just went over, and then another little paragraph says reaching 0 health, which I just went over, and reaching negative health. Oh yeah, on a critical success, I almost forgot. So if you're bleeding, like where we just talked about, where you have to make endurance rolls to see if you bleed out another point or see if you bleed out 2 points or whatever happens. If you critically succeed in this endurance roll, then you, I actually forgot, so I haven't seen anybody do that in a while. It means you do not bleed out that round. Yeah, so in a critical success, you gain consciousness, in addition to not bleeding out a point that round, but you suffer a -5 to your defense, mobility, and all die rolls, and you now bleed out 1 point per minute instead of 1 point per round, assuming you don't get medical attention or some other miraculous thing happens before that. But you are still in that condition. I believe I called. I think it's just called dying or severely wounded. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is, whatever the name of the condition is it is -5 to your defense, mobility, and all die rolls. So instead of -2, it's now -5. For obvious reasons, you're in horrible. That's what I call the Boromir condition. Boromir's laying there, still technically alive, with all these arrows in him. Actually, he was probably technically worse off, but so yeah, and then you only bleed off 1 minute, 1 point per minute instead of every round, which is generally 6 seconds. Reaching negative health is the next little paragraph there, which I just went over. That just basically means if you go negative your health number. Say you have 20 health, half of your health would be 10, right? So if you get to 10 hit points or health points, you suffer the -2 to defense, mobility, and die rolls. If you get to -10 health, God's forbid, then you're dead. So there you go. All right, so while I'm on the health situation, this is the last thing about health, at least as far as the book goes. Natural healing. So characters heal 1 plus their vigor and health points per 24 hours of rest, which must include at least 8 hours of relatively uninterrupted sleep. And in that case, it's a minimum of 1 health point of healing. So if you have a -2 vigor, and you're like, oh well, I guess I don't heal at all, or I actually am wounded more after 24 hours. You could make a case for someone being in such bad condition. Maybe that's actually the case, but rules as intended, and it literally states it in here. You do heal a minimum of 1 health point after 24 hours, regardless, even if your vigor is -3 or whatever. But you wouldn't heal much faster than that, obviously. So, say for example, you have a +2 vigor, you would heal 3 points every 24 hours because healthier people in general heal faster. There's a talent called Quick Healer that adds another +2 to that. So in this case that I just gave right there, where you heal 3 points every 24 hours, with a Quick Healer talent, you would heal 5 every 24 hours, which is pretty quick, pretty fast. There's a way to heal faster than that, naturally, other than healing magic. Let's see. So if successful long-term care is applied via a successful DL10 healing arch roll, then a character heals this amount in 12 hours instead. So in that case, we just stated there that character that healed 5 per 24 hours would heal 5 every 12 hours, or 10 every 24. That's a pretty fast healer. So healing. But you do have to succeed in that DL10 healing arch roll, which is not that difficult. difficult because difficulty level 10. Because that's kind of easy. That's a medical knowledge that most people have some general grasp of just through sheer intellect, even if without training. Just knowing to keep the victim restful and giving that victim food or water at least every hour or two and changing bandages and all this kind of stuff. And if you go to the healing arts section in the skill section and read the healing arts section, it actually talks about how you have to, without a lot of detail, that it assumes that the healer is near the patient. At least every hour is kind of attending to the patient. So it's not don't hand wave it too much. It's not like I know I've played with some people like, oh, I do long-term healing arts in this guy for long-term care, also known as treating fresh wounds or treating old wounds. By the way, it's the same thing, same terminology, it's different terminology, but the same thing. And then I go off hunting and I am blah blah blah. So it's like that's fine, but just know that there's more responsibility than just rolling the 10 on the dice. There is some follow through, or else the GM is very much in his or her power to say, you're going to have to try it again, or someone else is going to, because the benefits of that patient's benefits of healing twice as fast is no longer applying because you're kind of ignoring him or her's ability to do that. So a person can actually do long-term care on themselves, but it's DL 15. So if you look in the healing arts skill section, it mentions that. So it's a little more difficult to take care of yourself. That's why there are nurses and doctors in the real world. Not impossible, but difficult because you have to. If you fall asleep for several hours, you might wake up and your bandages. I don't want to go into the details, but maybe your wounds have gotten really bad, or maybe you've forgotten to get enough water or food and stuff like that. So, okay, let's go to stamina. Stamina is obviously a derived trait as well, just like health is. Stamina is derived from it is 10 plus your vigor plus your total resolve modifier, skill modifier. So start with the number 10 plus your vigor. We'll choose that plus 2 vigor again. That's kind of nice. So that's 12 vigor, stamina right there. Plus your total resolve. We'll say you have, so resolve is willpower plus whatever skill levels you put in resolve. So we'll say in this example, this character has willpower plus 1, and they put 2 skill levels in resolve. So that would be 15 stamina, I believe. So it would be 10 plus your vigor, which is 12, plus your total resolve modifier, which is, what do we say, willpower 1, 2, plus the skill level, so a total of 3. So that's 15 stamina in this case, which is pretty good. Average, again, is around 10 for like just a normal like commoner or something. So stamina is a measurement of one's mental and spiritual strength, and supplies the power source for spells, certain combat maneuvers, and several other talents, and a few racial abilities. Even more mundane activities can cost stamina, just like in the real world. For example, sprinting, force marching, working for long periods, etc. A character's starting stamina is calculated as 10 plus figure attribute plus total resolve skill modifier, which we just went over, etc. All right, so as you can see right there, stamina is pretty much what you would imagine stamina is, but it slants a little more towards the mental, spiritual realm of stamina and not physical stamina, because that's really mostly your health. So that's how we kind of differentiate it in Savage Kingdoms. I mean, honestly, there is some physical elements to the stamina trait as well, obviously, but it is mostly a mental, spiritual thing. For example, so if you're trudging along, it costs stamina to travel more than 10 hours in a given day. If every hour you press on after 10 hours of travel, and there's a nice handy chart in the book about stamina costs and stuff on page 20, I believe. Yeah, top of page 20. For example, for every hour that you travel, I'm just using an example here. There's the table. Over 10 hours, you lose a point of stamina. So you can see that's kind of a physical thing, but it's also kind of a mental, because if you've ever done some hiking or a sport, anything where you're having to kind of push on, a good bit of it's mental as well, right? It's your willpower saying, look, I can get through this. I know it's uncomfortable, but I can go a little bit further. So yeah, so stamina governs these kind of real life things. For example, like I said, traveling overland more than 10 hours for no sleep at all for one night. So if your character doesn't sleep at all for an entire night, likes to stay up, keep watch, or there's some other thing that was happening to keep that character up, you would have -5 to stamina the following morning. And the reason it says the following morning is to assume that in 98% of role-playing games, it's at dawn or whatever, just in the morning when the characters begin to go adventure or describe or whatever the rest of their day is going to entail, explore or whatever. So that's why it says -5 to the following morning. So, but that could be the following. Basically, it's just -5 to stamina. In other words, you're going to be 5 stamina points down from your maximum, in the very least, if you have no sleep that night. If you don't sleep for 2 nights in a row, you're -15 to stamina the following morning. So that, in this case of the example that we just used, the character with the 15 stamina, even that character with 15 stamina would be at 0 after 2 nights in a row of no sleep. And those of us who have stayed up for 2 nights in a row, and I think I might have done that once or twice in my life, like a fool when I was younger. I think it was at Dragon Con actually. You can feel it even when you're in your 20s. I was able to kind of power through it, but it definitely hits you uh, later on. It's pretty nasty, pretty tough, as you might know. Speaking of which, no sleep at all for 3 nights in a row, which I've never, fortunately, ever done in real life, which is probably smart. You would have 0 stamina the following morning, regardless. Your character could have 24 stamina points, doesn't matter. You're at 0 stamina the following morning. And quite honestly, you'd be fortunate just to suffer only that. Per additional hour of hurried overland travel after 5 hours. Okay, yeah, I mentioned some of that stuff. Performing a battle talent could cost you anywhere from 0 to 2 stamina. Reason it says 0 is because a lot of battle talents in Savage Kingdoms don't cost stamina, but some of the fancy maneuvers cost 1. In some cases, some of them are 2. Uh, Berserker Rage costs 1 stamina, but every round that you use it. Double arrow shot costs 2 stamina for every time you shoot arrows. The reason why, because it's a pretty potent talent, but also realistically, I feel like that would cost a good bit of focus and stamina. Probably not 2 points, really, like in a more reality. Probably it's 1, but in a sort of game balance sense, I've made it 2 points because it's a pretty potent talent. Performing a dance, song, or story is 1 stamina per hour. Now, if it's a really vigorous dance, I definitely see it being a lot more than that. That could be 1 stamina per half hour, maybe even 1 stamina per quarter hour. And this is something I forget when I have people come perform at a tavern. Their characters perform, and I actually very much encourage that. I love the scald type characters. I almost don't want to say bard characters because bards get kind of a weird they have a kind of weird thing going on in D&D, but or any other kind of performance, temple dancers and that kind of stuff. I like people to do that, but sometimes I forget that it's like, hey, I'm gonna play my harp in the near the fire for 3 hours and earn a few coins. I earn a few coins, otherwise I'm just kind of doing it. And that probably should be 3 stamina points, but I usually just kind of forget to do that, just because I want people to do it. So, but technically that's the rule. And then there's a rule for only half normal sleep time game during the night. So, for example, if you take double watches and you don't quite get you only get 4 hours instead of 8 hours of sleep, you're -2 to stamina in the morning. So I wanted to put that in there in case like that kind of weirdness happened. Rowing a boat is 1 stamina per half hour. That's assume you're not you're kind of really going at it. If you're kind of coasting a lot, it's probably I would say it's only 1 per hour. Running long distance, which is 2 times your mobility, is 1 stamina per half hour. So in other words, that makes sense. You're pacing yourself, but you're still you're still applying a good bit of energy. Sailing a ship in stormy waters is 1 stamina per half hour. Because this is stormy waters, that's definitely probably pretty accurate there. If you ever done any sailing, I haven't done a whole lot, but enough to imagine that in a storm, it's all hands on deck, and you're completely focused. If it's a really really vicious storm, it's probably even more than that. What I would say, but anyway, that's the guideline. Sleeping in armor. It says see gear and supplies chapter. So I'll just go ahead and tell you what that means. So I think it's based on without me having to look. You think I would have my rules completely memorized? I don't. Only so much room in me noggin. I think the rule is for every yeah, it is actually for your every penalty that you have in for wearing armor for like the skill penalty. For example, like Brigandine armor, I think is -3 if it's just average quality armor. It's -2 if it's exceptional. But we'll just go. We'll just say it. You're wearing Brigandine armor, which is and Savage Kingdoms is mostly it's not necessarily actual brigandine. There are actually several terms for brigandine armor historically, anyway. But it implies leather that's been enhanced with metal rings or studs. There's also traditional brigandine where there was like the canvas armor with the little plates of metal. In any case, it's still like part metal, half leather, half canvas, half padded, whatever. That type of armor. And to say it was -3 when you wake up the next morning, you're down 3 stamina points for having slept in the armor. The benefit, of course, for sleeping in armor is that you're if you get attacked, you're already protected. You have some armor on. The drawback is if you sleep in armor, you do wake up with a little bit stiff. Having slept in chainmail armor in real life before, like a medieval reenactment event, or maybe it was a LARP event, it was one of those. Yeah, it was doable, and it wasn't terrible, but I do remember kind of like, I don't know, my shoulders, even though I had belted it correctly. I mean, just the way you sleep. And those of you who served in the military that have traveled with a lot of gear and even maybe some actual armor like Kevlar plating or whatever probably understand what I'm talking about. You do occasionally get used to it, but it is what it is. What else is kind of cool? Sleeping in armor, sprinting through or in close proximity of combat is 1 stamina point. This is my own rule that I sometimes forget. So I actually ruled it that. So originally, when I was designing the game, I was going to charge. You always spent 1 stamina point every round you sprinted, uh, because you get ×3 to your mobility. You can as 2 actions as your full round, which is awesome. But I figured that everybody's just going to do that unless over the ×2 movement because it still costs 2 actions. So why not just sprint every time instead of run? So I figured, well, the point is because in real life, if you're all out sprinting, 40-yard dash, 100-yard dash, dashing, hence the term, it does cost a good bit of stamina. But then I thought, well, if you're sprinting, like if you sprint just 12 seconds, you spent 2 stamina. That seems a little bit much. So anyway, the rule is if you're sprinting through combat because there's stuff happening and you're kind of on your guard, you're probably not even having to run in a straight line that much, or very close to combat, close proximity, it costs you a stamina point then. If you're sprinting off stage-ish to kind of run to tell a message to a village, as GM is probably not going to charge you. Technically, the rule in that case is 1 stamina per minute. So there you go. So if you have to run, I'm going to warn the next village over the hill about this incoming invading army. I've got to get there. I've got 2 minutes. It'll take you. GM says you got 2 minutes. It'll take you 2 minutes to get there. 2 stamina points, but not impossible. Not really that difficult. All right. So that was stuff about stamina costs. Let's go to, I'll end the video with saying, so stamina, like health, has the full number and the half number on the character sheet for Savage Kingdoms. So it is for another reason. So when you go to half stamina, and this is a little subparagraph within the stamina section on page 19, it says reaching half stamina when a character falls to half or less his or her stamina, the fatigued condition is applied. That is, it's -2 to defense, mobility, and all die rolls until at least 1 point above half stamina can be gained through rest, sleep, meditation, or the like, or whatever happens. See below. Which I'll get to in a second. So it's the same thing. So even though it's called the fatigued condition, it's the same effects as the health, as going to half health, which is called staggered. So going to half health is staggered is the name of the condition. Going to half stamina is called fatigued. So here was where my little game design dilemma was. So if you have both conditions of staggered and fatigue, they do not stack. And it does say it in the book pretty explicitly, at least in a couple places. They don't stack, even though they have different names. So as a game designer, I probably should have, and I thought about it, and for some reason I didn't do it, probably should have named the condition the same thing so that because it's more intuitive to go, well, I've got the condition twice. I doubt it stacks. So probably that's on me. That I probably should have named it 2 different things. I think in the next game I'm working on, I'm calling it the same thing. I think the reason I elected not to is that in Savage Kingdoms particularly, I was trying to match I was trying to be much more descriptive. So whenever a name was applied to something, I wanted it to be very evocative of what was going on in addition to the game mechanic. So staggered was more of a physical. You're literally staggered from horrible wounds or at least moderate wounds. Whereas stamina, being at half stamina, is fatigue. It's more of a you're just tired, and it's not necessarily that you're bleeding or whatever. But anyway, just know that those conditions do not stack. So there you go. So if you were to be staggered and fatigued, it's not -4 to all those things. It's just -2. Just one or the other. It's pretty clear in the book, but I wanted to point that out. All right, reaching 0 stamina. Upon reaching 0 stamina, the character suffers a -5 penalty to defense, mobility, and all die rolls. This is also known as the exhausted condition. So again, it's the same game mechanical condition of being at 0 health or less if you're conscious. -5 to defense, mobility, and all your die rolls. But two different conditions. If you get both conditions where you're at 0 health and 0 stamina, they don't stack. It's just -5. They probably should stack in this case, honestly. But -10 is kind of ridiculous. But think about it. If you're that exhausted and you're that wounded, I mean, you're probably in pretty bad shape. But -5 is pretty bad already. So there you go. So that's for reaching 0. All right. So really quick, just to end the video with about how to, because I mentioned how to recover health, right, through rest and stuff. There's also healing magic, by the way. Back on the health thing really quick, because just not. So there is healing magic in the game. Usually it comes from the life magic discipline. There's a few rare alchemical concoctions you can make, like a healing salve. There's some healing herbs via the herbalism skill, etc. But magical healing, particularly with the heal wounds spell, which is through life magic. There's also some healing magic like cure ailment, which cures the poison condition or the disease condition. But heal wounds can give you health immediately back, or not immediately, or an hour later if you're performing it as a ritual, which gives you a +2 bonus and means you got a better chance of healing people. But remember, the caster, the mage, the magician who casts a spell also loses a health point for every time he or she casts a heal wound spell. If he or she casts the radial version, which is the DL15 version of heal wounds, it heals people within a yard of the healer, of the healing mage. That actually costs the magician 2 health points. So don't forget that, because I usually don't overlook that one, but there's a couple times I almost have, and I'm like, oh, wait. That's very evocative of the game setting. So I did that as a game designer for 2 reasons. One was the old dilemma of cure wounds, curing everyone. This is D&D, curing everyone in the village. Like, why would, if a priest knows that spell and it's pretty easy to learn, even an acolyte can learn, it's like a first level spell. Why is that not being used all the time? I mean, granted, yeah, spell slots and time, so I get it. So anyway, this is a deeper reason to show why healers don't always just, oh, here's a curative spell, no problem, because they themselves take on some of that pain, and that's where that's coming from. You're using part of your life force. It doesn't come from nothing; it's coming from you into them, and that's why it drains a bit of your own health. Or it can be explained that you're taking a little bit of their pain into you as well, which I think is kind of cool. So 1 health point for heal wounds, the lower version, the DL10 version, the DL15 version, the radial version cost 2 health to the magician. So it is possible. I've seen it happen before in gameplay, where you heal someone else 1 point or maybe 2, and you yourself are injured the same amount. But that's the risk you take as a healing magician. And also it does cost stamina just as well, like any other spell. So there you go. I want to hit upon that. All right, last thing. Stamina recovery, since we talked about health recovery. Stamina recovery, you recover 1 point of stamina per point of rest, per hour of rest. So it's pretty simple. But it means dedicated rest. So if you're resting, like trotting on horseback, I did put the caveat in there. It says riding in a wagon or aboard a ship, for example, might be restful enough to recover stamina per GM discretion, perhaps assuming that the journey is through level terrain or undisturbed by poor weather. So if you're in perfect conditions, it's a perfect road, and maybe you're just going half speed and you're back of a wagon trying to sleep, you could probably recover stamina. If you're on the fence about it, maybe the GM could say you recover 1 per 2 hours in that case. Or if you're on a ship at sea and the weather is fine and you're not being attacked by pirates or a sea serpent or whatever at the time, then you could probably gain your stamina. Otherwise, it's assumed that you just kind of go and rest, meditate if you're a particular, like more of a spiritual character, or maybe a character from the East, some of the Eastern cultures. In that way. In fact, there is a talent called Meditative Trance where you recover 1 stamina per every half hour when you kind of go into this meditative trance. So it's literally for gaining stamina back quickly. There's also Purple Lotus, which recovers people's stamina, and it even gives you bonus stamina if you they do that if you're around burning Purple Lotus incense and that kind of stuff, which you can make another thing through herbalism. I think you need some alchemy skill with that as well. But this video is not really about that. So, okay. So, and then you recover all your stamina points after 8 hours of sleep. So overnight sleeping / resting, a full 8 hours, even if you're down 12 stamina points, after 8 hours of a nice sleep rest, you get all of your stamina back, regardless of how much you spent. Caveat to that is, so after 6, if you have the light sleeper talent where you're completely recharged after 6 hours of sleep, after 6 hours of sleep, you get all your stamina back, regardless of how much you've spent. Also, if you are of the Shi race, the Shi, the Dark Shi, the Luna Shi, and the Wild Shi, only need 6 hours of trance or dream trance as well, and they get their stamina back. So there you go. I think I'm going to stop there. That's it. So 36 minutes, not horrible. Hopefully that will answer your questions about health and stamina and maybe get you inspired a little bit more about Savage Kingdoms, particularly the 3rd edition. Pick up the books if you haven't already gotten them. There's a core rulebook and that sort of thing. The Savage East is the other book that expands upon the setting. And the new book, Heroic Adventures, I'm still working on, but hopefully it'll be out in the next couple of months. So, all right. Thanks for paying attention, and hopefully you made it this far. Please like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And I'll talk to you guys later.